Hi, my name is Anthony Barba, and this presentation will be on the global response to overfishing and its related consequences. Overfishing has been a growing problem over the last several decades. The impact of exploitative fishing practices has had dramatic effect on our ocean's ecosystem, climate, and has caused strain on local fisheries. Overfishing can change the size of fish, how they reproduce, and the speed at which they reproduce. Since large-scale fisheries often catch predatory fish, the carbon reduction that results from their eating smaller fish is offset, causing an increase in CO2 levels. This is in addition to the emissions of large-scale fishing boats, which is adding to the impacts of climate change. Further, large-scale fisheries are depleting the most prominent source of protein for many developing coastal communities who depend on these markets to survive. When fish disappear, so do jobs in coastal economies. The first attempts to address these growing concerns began at the Doha Ministerial Conference in 2001, with directives to clarify and improve existing disciplines on fisheries subsidies. The Hong Kong Ministerial Conference in 2005 expanded on these negotiations to include prohibitions on fisheries subsidies contributing to overcapacity and overfishing. Global recognition of subsidies and the major part they play in the exploitation of these resources has been at the center of much debate. The belief is that subsidies enable fisheries to undervalue such resources and have made engaging in these behaviors much easier. Global fishing subsidies are estimated to be as high as $35 billion annually, of which $20 billion directly contributes to overfishing. According to FAO data, the percentage of stocks fished at biologically unsustainable levels increased from 10% in 1974 to 34.2% in 2017. Since taxes fund subsidies, taxpayers are effectively paying industrial boats to degrade the environment and destroy the livelihoods of vulnerable coastal communities. Targeting subsidies makes the World Trade Organization, containing 164 countries, the most suitable international organization to facilitate negotiations related to global fisheries. The UN affirmed this when they adopted SDG 14.6, part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015. The most recent rounds of negotiations, scheduled in Geneva, was postponed due to travel restrictions related to a COVID-19 variant. Additional deterrence efforts include the Agreement on Port-State Measures, which entered into force in June of 2016. It is the first binding international agreement to specifically target illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, also known as IUU. The treaty requires that fishing vessels request permission to dock at a port and inform the port of its fishing operations. Its objectives is to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUU fishing by preventing vessels engaged in IUU fishing from using ports and landing their catches. Currently, the treaty has 55 parties, which includes 54 states plus the European Union. The growing number of parties to the agreement makes it increasingly difficult for unethical catch to make its way to national and international markets and reduces the incentives for dishonest fishing operations to continue their IUU activities. The legal foundation for port-state measures began with the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Although they related to marine pollution rather than fisheries, the 1982 Convention in Article 218 addresses port-state measures. In the decades following, several binding and non-binding fishery instruments were concluded. These included the 1993 FAO Compliance Agreement, the 1995 Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, the 1995 UN Fish Stocks Agreement, and the 2001 FAO International Plan of Action to prevent, deter, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Following these agreements, the FAO began developing standards for control in fishing ports. This led to the FAO Committee on Fisheries endorsement of the Model Scheme on Port-State Measures to combat IUU fishing. The model recommended minimum standards for PSMs. As mentioned earlier, the WTO has been delegated the task of orchestrating negotiations and is currently working on a multilateral agreement. Despite setbacks due to disagreements and new travel restrictions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the WTO has made progress on negotiations and hopes to come to an agreement by the next ministerial conference. The implications of such an agreement establishes a newfound hope for our oceans, people, and planet. What can you do? Visit stopfundingoverfishing.com to learn more about the issue, the organizations involved, and to donate. Donations help to fund efforts that combat overfishing and IUU fishing practices.